In fact, the latest, Trump has asserted that the US is in charge of Venezuela. This is after we are getting contradictory statements from the US, with the president saying one thing, his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying another. But Trump has just asserted that the US is in charge of Venezuela. This even as Marco Rubio clarified that Washington will not run Venezuela day to day after Trump's remark triggered global concern. Marco Rubio says the US strategy is pressure, not occupation, with the oil quarantine firmly in place to target sanctioned tankers and curb drug trafficking as well. But it's been 2 days since the US triggered regime change, drawing mixed reactions globally, backing from Israel and France, condemnation from China and Russia. In fact, satellite images coming in show a strike that damaged the Fuerteventura military complex. Just take a look at the visuals playing out on your screens at the moment. This is the before and after of the US strikes. This as Donald Trump has warned the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez of harsher consequences, while US Vice President J.D. Vance defends the action, calling Venezuela a cartel profit hub. Meanwhile, Venezuela's military has backed Rodriguez to succeed Maduro, accusing the US of civilian casualties.
We expect to see changes in Venezuela. Changes of all kinds, long-term, short-term. We'd love to see all kinds of changes. But the most immediate changes are the ones that are in the national interest of the United States. What we are focused on right now is all of the problems we had with when Maduro was there. We still have those problems in terms of them needing to be addressed. We are going to give people an opportunity to address those challenges and those problems. Until they address it, they will continue to face this oil quarantine. They will continue to face pressure from the United States. We will continue to target drug boats if they try to run towards the United States. We will continue to seize the boats that are sanctioned with court orders. We will continue to do that and potentially other things until the things we need to see addressed are addressed.
On the other hand, pressed on what Donald Trump currently means, he has clearly said that they are in charge as far as Venezuela is concerned. Natasha's with us to make sense of all the contradictory remarks coming in from the United States. Natasha, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, the comments come after Marco Rubio has said what he said, denying that US is actually going to run Venezuela. Help us understand the contradiction at the heart of this crisis, with Trump saying we're in charge, Marco Rubio saying the US doesn't plan to govern Venezuela. Which statement actually reflects official US policy here right now as we speak?
Well, yes, that really is the big question. What is official US policy on what happens ahead in Venezuela? And it seems pretty clear that with Donald Trump, this whole attack had been in the works for months now. So they knew that this was coming. But I get the sense from the US administration that they really hadn't thought forward to that. And that is why you see that confusion. That is why you have Donald Trump, talking and giving a statement and looking back at his team and saying, well, they'll be running the country and they look surprised themselves. So this is really ambiguous, to be honest, at the moment. Now, the question is whether the United States is going to convert Venezuela into some sort of protectorate. What Donald Trump seems to be saying and what he's consistent about is that for the moment, he's going to try and work with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, but only if that actually works. It seems to many, including in the international community, that the United States here is more interested in oil than a democracy. And if you notice and if you watch Donald Trump's remarks carefully since the time of this unprecedented kidnapping of Maduro from Venezuela, he hasn't really so far prioritized democracy. It's been, yes, about Maduro, about him as a narco-terrorist, and about the US wanting to protect its interests, but not so much about democracy. So that is the big question. How do you run a country of 31 million people with this tumult at the moment? And that's what we're going to be watching for in the days ahead.
Meanwhile, after the US said it needs Venezuela's interim president to provide total access to her country's resources, we have Donald Trump just categorically saying that Venezuela is a dead country, it needs some sort of rescuing, shaping the entire narrative as the US as a sort of knight in shining armor at this stage, right, Natasha?
Yes, he said things like, we're going to make Venezuela great again. Remember, he campaigned in the United States saying he would make America great again. What he's really referring to is that Venezuela actually sits on huge reserves of crude oil. And and despite sitting on these huge reserves, the percentage of oil that Venezuela actually produces is very small compared to the worldwide output, and that's because the infrastructure hasn't been developed. There's been a lot of chaos under Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and corruption that we've heard about. So what Donald Trump is saying is that when they come in with this team of U.S. companies, is what he said, that are willing to invest billions of dollars, according to him, they'll be able to overhaul that infrastructure, get that economy going again. And when they do that, the Venezuelan people will also benefit. But all of that is obviously easier said than done. We're talking about a separate country, not a state of the United States. And how this actually plays out, whether Rodriguez will succeed in working with Donald Trump or not, remains to be seen. Clearly, President Trump doesn't seem to have any interest in Maria Machado, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, who actually dedicated her prize, the opposition leader in Venezuela, who actually dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump, but he doesn't seem to be giving her that much credit. And we'll see if Rodriguez will actually be able to work with the United States. Seems very iffy at the moment.
Indeed. Also, Natasha, interestingly, he just mentioned India in relation to the sale of Russian oil. In fact, his aide just said that if you are buying Russian oil, cheap Russian oil, you are giving the US president a hard choice with tariffs. Natasha, how is this likely to play into India's wider balancing act between Moscow, Washington, and our own energy security?
A few months back during the United Nations General Assembly, I really got a chance to speak to more Indian officials who had traveled here to the United States. You remember at that time, the trade talks were continuing on a trade deal. And the sense that I got from them was President Donald Trump says certain things publicly, and behind privately is different. And that's true for most political leaders, right? But what I heard from the Indian delegation was they had kind of become more thick-skinned around some of the offhand comments that Donald Trump keeps making regards tariffs in India and regards President Modi, Prime Minister Modi, and regards. So they still remain hopeful of that deal. And I think some of these immediate comments are not always taken as seriously, either by the US officials or Indian officials.
Natasha, as always, thank you so much for breaking down all the latest developments for us. We'll continue to track all the finer details coming in. For now, let's turn our attention to the ground sentiment as far as Venezuela is concerned. Take a look at this report Trini Mary has sent us.
Government supporters went to the streets to demonstrate, demanding the release of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. The government supporter says that the U.S. took an illegal actions inside of Venezuelan soil, and they are claiming that those actions should be prosecuted in international institutions. They are saying that they will continue in the streets until Nicolas Maduro is released. For now, Delcy Rodriguez, which was the former vice president of Venezuela, was proclaimed as the president in charge of the country by the Supreme Court. And also, the Electoral Board and other institutions are backing Delcy Rodriguez as the new president of the country. These are institutions that mostly are controlled by loyals to Nicolas Maduro. So that is why most people are seeing in the country that this is a continuity, despite the words of President Donald Trump that said he will run the country. They say that is not true, that loyals to Nicolas Maduro are in front of this and they are taking the decisions. In Caracas, in the streets, there is silence because many people have decided to stay at home. Some others went to supermarkets and pharmacies to buy food and medicines in case something happens in the coming days, because there was a shock, the operation taken by the US so suddenly. And also, most people decided to stay at home as much as possible. So the government supporters mostly went to the streets on Sunday. Also, we need to say that on Monday, the parliament will be swearing in the new fraction of the parliament with new lawmakers. These lawmakers are backing Delcy Rodriguez because this is one of the biggest institutions controlled by the government. And of course, it is expected that she appear on that institution on Monday. We need to say that also the airport is resuming operations. Domestic flights are working in the country. Also, borders are open to show a little of normality amid this uncertainty that has caused the operation taken by the U.S. Also, there's another situation in Venezuela, and that is that all the institutions are making statements saying that they reject all this operation taken by the U.S., but despite that, they will continue working as normal, resuming their activities, basically. So this is a country that, amid this situation, is trying to keep going, keep working, and on Monday, it began many activities, opening brick and mortar stores that have been closed over the Saturday and Sunday. And also, it is expected that many people went to the street to work as usual after the New Year's Eve break that they had over the weekend.